Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to go over the ladies who are most likely to remain single based on research. I'm going to make the male version as well. So, ladies, if you're upset that you think I'm picking on you, I'm not. But only about like 10 to 12% of ladies watch this channel. My other channel, it's like 80%. But still, any of the ladies who come across and watch this one, I'm not making this to pick on anybody. I'm not trying to discourage anybody either. I'm making this video because a lot of people, I think, want a relationship and they're kind of lost as to why they're not in one. And I want to highlight these points so that you can understand what could be going on. Basically, the best way to put it is it's not something fundamentally wrong with you. Maybe it's just some characteristics that's holding you back. And the research will show that a lot of these things can be adjusted and it can really, really increase your chances of getting into a healthy relationship. And as I mentioned, I'm going to make the corresponding video for either gender. I don't know which one is going to be posted first, but hopefully this will help. Let's go ahead and jump right in. The very first one is very interesting to me. That's why I put it first. It might take a little long to explain it, so I put it first just so I can make sure the video doesn't get too long. But there's a negative belief that a lot of these women have, okay? And they basically believe that if it happens to some women, it will happen to all women generally, okay? And I'm gonna break down the percentages. Never married women, so this was 67%, and then divorced women, 66, were significantly more likely than married women to believe that what happens to women generally will affect their own life outcome. This is a negative thought. And the most interesting part of this, at least for me personally, is in contrast, widowed women, so women who were married, but unfortunately their husband passed, tended to resemble married women in their responses, suggesting, at least from my perspective, that social and economical ties of traditional marriage, basically your perspective of traditional marriage, shapes how that occurs for you in your life. If you have a more positive view on marriage, you tend to be more comfortable with the risks that marriage involves. But I really want to expand on this point because I really feel like this is happening on a very large scale right now, and it's affecting both men and women because women are behaving this way, and it's not their fault. Actually, it's probably a response from seeing all these things on social media, etc. But I think what happened is social media kind of expanded on all the bad and good, but it highlights the bad more. And so ladies are getting in their head a little bit and thinking all men are like this. Or if this happens to some random person in Africa or Saudi Arabia or some other country and they're in America and they think, okay, that's going to happen to me as well, without thinking of all the differences. And I'm not judging different countries. I would just give an example because I'm from America. All these different things that may factor into why this happened. So let's say, for example, we have a husband in a country that this lady, hypothetical lady, is not from, okay? And for whatever reason, they have very strict laws against certain things, and he ended up hurting his wife. Maybe he did some sort of DV, some domestic issues, right? And it made the headlines all over the news and it spread all over social media. This is obviously a made up story. And now so many women are making videos about this and now they're watching it and saying, this is why you should never get married because this can happen, right? So that's the story, okay? That is part of where this research is coming from, the negative belief that if it happens to some women, it's going to happen to all of them. That does not make sense logically, but it's the scare factor, right? You don't want your husband that you fall in love with to do that to you. Nobody does. But the reality is not all men do that. That's not true. But they're afraid of that. So actually what's interesting is they're avoiding marriage out of their own fear of something that may never happen to them. And they have a negative view of marriage in general. So I hope that covered that point. I could really go on and on and on about that point, but I'm trying not to because I know it can get confusing. And I'm a person who can go into tangents when it comes to psychology in particular. It's a habit of mine, so I try not to do that. But I know I do it naturally. The next one is women with strong standards for emotional labor and equality. I'm not saying this is wrong, but I do think it can be a little challenging for expecting certain things when a lot of men maybe weren't raised this way. I'm not giving an excuse to men or women. I'm just saying that based on research, women who have these strong standards, very strong standards, they tend to remain single. And I'm going to explain this a little bit more. It's usually like they expect equal household labor, equal emotional availability, equal respect and communication. And usually, what's tricky is men and women are raised so differently. This may not be easy to come by. It doesn't mean he can't learn. There's a difference, okay? A lot of people think if a man is not a certain way right when you meet him, that he's never going to become that way. That's incredibly false. Like anybody of you guys who are in a relationship, most of you guys have changed for, your wife or your significant other. That just always happens. And women do that too, right? But a lot of times men were raised with their mom and their dad, where their dad was pretty much hands off and he was just working, and the mom was pretty much in the house doing everything. But they didn't have that like connection with their father in the same way they had with their mother. Father was pretty unavailable in some ways. And so it's really challenging for men to suddenly rise to this expectation without them learning that in the home. They can learn it through the marriage, but it doesn't mean that, I don't feel like it makes sense all the way to reject a man simply for these things, where these are things that can be easily changed. They're pretty simple stuff eventually as time goes on. However, a lot of these ladies take these as a very strict deal breaker and break up or just don't go with men who don't fit this. But it's unfortunate because so many of them are single. So it does prove there's a little bit of an issue there. Will men end up stepping up and being able to fit these roles? I think so, but I think it's going to take time. And I think it's a lot easier for them to do so if they have a partner who supports them in their growth. But that's just my opinion. The next one is, I think, pretty obvious, but women who experience early family instability or negative relationships, they do tend to be single, and I think this makes sense. Usually, the higher likelihood among women would be witness high conflict or unhappy marriages growing up, or they had traumatic and abusive relationships, but they also maybe have been, which, a little bit of a scary topic, but like assaulted when they were a kid. You can look at the research. We're not going to talk too much about that. The next one is interesting. Women that live in urban high-cost areas or like highly, I wanted to say highly individual societies, but that's not the right word. I know that there's a word. Why do I not have it? Sorry, guys. I know I've been not saying enough words recently. I'm torn between school and my job and private practice, and I'm just busy. But whatever the word is, hopefully you guys know. Larger cities and these types of cultures that are more individual do correlate with later marriage, and a lot of them are actually more single. And part of the reason is because they have to focus on career, and it's really hard to focus on friendships and family. That's just part of it, both men and women, by the way. The next one I thought was really interesting. Ladies that have caregiving responsibilities. So women who spend a lot of their adulthood, much of their adulthood, if you look at the research, caring for parents or disabled relatives, these responsibilities are incredibly time consuming, and it's very hard for her to have long-term relationships. The last one is very interesting, but it's kind of triggering, but that's why I put it last, because a lot of you guys don't watch all the way. So I'm just going to share it. Higher education and career do have a correlation between remaining single. And it's really interesting because it's not necessarily her career. It's the fact that, let's say she has a good career education, she's expecting a partner who is equally qualified or more qualified. And that's pretty difficult because the higher education, the pool is just smaller. That's not logical at all. And I'm a person who has high education, and my significant other has less education than I do, but I don't care at all. I'd never even thought about that. But if I did, I'd probably be single right now. And it's not to judge people who are single, but it's just something that I correlated. Ladies, if you are a person with higher education or you're career driven or whatever your version is, that's okay. But it's important to balance those things, but also being more lenient with your partner because, that doesn't mean he's a less attractive guy. I just think there are plenty of good men out there that he might not look perfect on paper, but he's a good guy. That's just, you'll only know who a good person is if you give a chance to meet him or talk to him or date him. And I think a lot of women more than men struggle with this one. I'm going to make the male version, so it's not like I'm picking on ladies here, but that's really important. Learning what's compatible internally, because a marriage is not going to stick towards career and education. A lot of women who get pregnant or have children, sometimes they have to focus on kids for a little bit if they want to, and that's perfectly fine. I think that's actually great. And the career is not going to be there, but the children are, the marriages, and maybe the career will be there as well. But it's just something to keep in mind, that the marriage is not built on these, these variables, these check boxes of who a man is. It's who he is internally. But anyways, I'm going to stop talking. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.